Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to the A24 project here on the Nerd Party Network, the only podcast that takes you through the entire back catalogue of A24, reviews the latest releases, and brings you interviews with the people behind the great movies. I'm your co-host Dallas King, and with me as always is Lee Hutchison. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really excited to finally talk about this one. I think it's just approaching almost 2 months since I saw the film. So yeah, I've been sitting on these thoughts for quite a while, and finally the moment's here.
Yeah, I missed out on one of my traditional introductions there. I actually probably should have gone the Adam Sandler to my Brendan Fraser, given that we're getting an Airheads reunion with the Variety's actors on actors. Have you seen Airheads? Is that a movie that you're familiar with?
I don't think I've seen that in a long time.
Yeah, I haven't seen it in a long time, but I think it was like around that. I think I actually came to it off the back of like going, a deep dive into Tarantino, and sort of Steve Buscemi was my favorite actors in like sort of the mid 90s, and I'd seen that he was in it, and then we got a story about a rock band that take a radio station hostage in order to get a record deal. But yeah, Airheads, highly recommended. But that's not the film that we're here to talk about today, because on today's show, we are taking a look at the Renaissance with Brendan Fraser's much lauded performance in The Whale. But before we do, a couple of quick tidbits on A24 Hour News. We have reviewed a couple films recently on the podcast. Pearl and Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. I have to say that one slowly just to make sure I get it right. And I think on both the episodes we were mildly annoyed at the fact that we'd had to use our old iTunes US accounts in order to see these films. Actually, no, I didn't. I saw Pearl in Venice. I'm lying, but you did. And then we were moaning about the fact that UK has still not had a release date for either of these films, which was odd, especially for Pearl, given that X had come out within a matter of weeks of the US release date. But we have good news for you if you're waiting for either of those films. Pearl has been dated now for March 17th, 2023 here in the UK, and as of just literally a couple of days ago, Marcel the Shell with Shoes On will be dropping in the UK cinemas on February the 17th as well. So I guess potential to see one of the best animated film Oscar contenders just before the Oscars. So are you excited that UK is finally playing catch up once again with America on these films?
It's really frustrating. I mean, the reality is that these films will be like $5 in a couple of weeks or a month or two time on iTunes, and people will be paying up then. And I mean, the reality is I think a lot of people have already been pirating Pearl based on this huge spike that I saw of Letterboxd reviews when it went to VOD in America. So
there was a lot of high-res screen grabs and GIFs coming out of that film on Twitter, especially of the final shot during the end credits of that one.
And I'm gonna go one. I'm gonna give you a little scoop here. It's
some exclusive news dropped since we started recording.
But you mentioned a couple of weeks ago that A24 would be doing the Whale in the UK. That's right, isn't it?
It was as of recording a couple of weeks ago. Yes.
Yeah. Well, A24 are still going to be releasing the Whale, but there's a very specific reason that they're releasing the Whale and others aren't. So A24, according to my inside source, was telling me that A24 were being, I'm going to quote them here, being very greedy with the pricing when selling the film, and that they were potentially trying to sell unrealistic expectations, and that it would have had to make about 8 million to break even in the UK to the people that they were selling it to, and so on. So perhaps the reason that A24 are releasing The Whale in the UK is that they sort of priced everyone else out of the market. I mean, usually in probably previous climates, A24 I say in previous climates, the Oscar movies like this would have ramped up quite a lot of money at the box office, but those type of films, they're struggling to make that kind of cash and so on, and to make that money to break even is a big ask in the UK markets as well, for a film that might only be running in a few weeks, and potentially it's still up against Avatar and other such films in their runs. So yeah, it was in a bit of an interesting bit of gossip. A friend gave me that.
Yeah, because I mean, yeah, having worked in an independent cinema that did very well in sort of January, February time. Yeah, I could have totally seen that, sort of 6, 7, 8 years ago, a film like The Whale easily been able to make 8 to 10 million at the UK box office. But obviously, there has been a lot of talk recently about, just how crowded January and February gets for the UK with all these titles that they're dropping in America in sort of November, December time, just before Christmas, but we have to wait until January, February, and then they all sort of get condensed into sort of like a 3-4 week window. So it is a lot harder for films to make money, and obviously, the audiences, in terms of audiences returning to cinemas, are not where they used to be either. So it's interesting that they potentially price themselves out of the market, given essentially the inverse almost happened with Everything Everywhere All at Once, which was A24's first release in the UK, that nobody seemed to be willing to take a risk on that film. And then it did really well, to the point where then A24 held all the cards, and basically everyone got priced out the fact that by the time it was really popular, they couldn't afford to pay for it, and therefore, A24, released it in the UK. So yeah, interesting to see, because The Whale has been a very interesting release strategy for A24. It's been difficult, I think. I'd be keen to hear your sort of opinion on your sort of expectations and stuff like that, because obviously it debuted at the Venice Film Festival, where I saw the world premiere, where Brendan Fraser got a 6-minute standing ovation. It played at Toronto, New York, London, stuff like that. However, up until probably about 2-3 weeks ago, we had only really ever seen sort of one image from the film. The A24 were holding back on. I mean, at this point, the film drops today, when you're potentially listening to this podcast, you would have had a teaser trailer and a full theatrical trailer, where we've only really had a teaser trailer. Now, there's been a lot of talk about why that is. Everyone was talking about, if you've seen it at a festival or heard anything coming out of the festival, they'd be saying Brendan Fraser has to be one of the front runners for the best actor Oscar and stuff like that. It's an amazing comeback. He's sensational in the film, etc. Why wouldn't you be doing more to promote this film? But obviously there is a lot of potential issues surrounding the character, and the fact that he is playing. I mean, we'll just sort of dive into this. Directed by Darren Aronofsky and written for the screen by Samuel D. Hunter, adapted from the stage play that he wrote as well. Stars Brendan Fraser, Hong Chow, Sadie Sink, Ty Simpkins, and Samantha Morton. Charlie is a £600 reclusive English tutor who has not left his apartment in years, but following a health scare, he seeks to reconnect with his strange teenage daughter. So, obviously, there's been a lot of debate around the film about the fact that Brendan Fraser is, playing a £600 man and is wearing a prosthetic bodysuit, and why they would go with that option as opposed to finding, just a genuine £600 actor to play the role and stuff like that. And then you've got issues around, obviously, how does the film treat a character like that? And I mean, there was a lot of backlash around a certain couple of reviews, I believe. It might have been the Variety one and the Guardian one out of Venice, where it used language about essentially describing the character as sort of a Jabba the Hutt-esque blob. They made the easy puns about, a blubbering mess and stuff like that, because, referring to the character as a whale. However, as we'll get into when we discuss the film, the whale of the title does not actually refer to the character of Charlie. So, I mean, what were your sort of expectations leading into seeing it? Because you saw it at the London Film Festival.
Yeah, I mean, I was incredibly hyped for it. I just was one of those ones, like, I was going to miss the press screening. I was very confident that I would miss it, sort of due to work. So I was going to be down in London for a few days with work, and then I was going to stay on, catch some of the film festival. So I was kind of booked in to see a few A24 films. I was equally going to be able to kind of catch things like The Eternal Daughter, which I see has gone on to video on demand this week in America already, which I would highly recommend people check out that one. I'm looking forward to us getting the opportunity to talk about that one. And yeah, I caught The Inspection as well. And yeah, this one was one I was really hyped for, and almost going in, I thought, this one's going to be a slam dunk to be in at least my top 10 film of the year. And yeah, I caught it the day after the premiere event, where obviously Brendan Fraser attended and Darren Aronofsky, but we were really lucky for sort of this matinee style screening to be welcome to welcome Darren Aronofsky and the playwright behind the original play and the film as well, which really set things up. And yeah, I think I expected going in to love the film and be blown away by it, and yeah, unfortunately that didn't quite come together for me.
The sort of, I guess, the critical acclaim sort of splits into sort of two camps. There are some people who were, I think, probably myself included, who just the final act of the film just hit me in such a raw emotional way that I got swept up with that sort of final few moments. And for me, it was something that was probably a sort of high 3, sort of low 4-star film, which then became elevated to a 5-star film. I just had such a visceral reaction to it. I will admit that I do not cry much at movies. But I think After Sun, which I'd seen a couple weeks before that, the Edinburgh Film Festival had, I guess, like as Chandler sort of said, it opened a gate during the Under Pressure scene, and this one was just like the dam burst. And I mean, I had to sit through like the entire end credits of the film. I was just a complete and total mess, and it took me a long time to compose myself. But we'll discuss that later. But there's been a huge praise for Brendan Fraser's performance, yet there are, I think, a lot of issues for people surrounding the film, whether it's how it tackles the character of Charlie himself. I mean, sort of Samuel D. Hunter, who wrote the play, was talking at Venice, and I think he may have sort of talked at London as well about how he'd sort of struggled with sort of weight issues himself, and that sort of fed into the script. But I think the biggest things which people have issues with is I think a script which is maybe sometimes a little bit too on the nose, perhaps, and also the thing which affects any sort of film adaptation of a play is how do you escape the obvious sort of theatrical boundaries of the stage play. Obviously, I think for me it almost helps with something like this, where this is a character who has not left his apartment in years. He is trapped there. He's confined there. So therefore, it works by having quite a small space for him to live in. But also, I believe there's been talk about using the sort of the 1:3 sort of academy ratios and stuff like that. But again, it's just the framing of the shots allow, again, sort of this metaphorical and literal sort of prison in which he is trapped, and he is trapped in his body, and he is trapped in his flat. And yeah, it's something which over the course of the movie he tries to, I guess, break free from. So I mean, what were some of your issues with the film?
The end.
I
had the complete opposite reaction to you. I couldn't have been further from it, truth be told. So whether we want to dive into that at this point, that was fundamentally where the film fell apart for me in that last 15 minutes.
Okay. We'll stick a pin in that one then for now. So, I mean, let's talk about Brendan Fraser, I guess. For a start, much has been made about this performance. This is a character, an actor who was a huge star in the sort of late 90s, sort of coming off the sort of the Mummy franchise and stuff like that, and then sort of stepped away from sort of Hollywood due to, after an incident at the Golden Globes, and it almost sort of felt like shut out for a long time, and then this it feels like essentially a sort of a comeback for him and I think it was a really interesting role because he is in this sort of prosthetic suit and stuff like that, but you can still see Brendan Fraser within there, and you sort of gravitate toward him. He's an incredibly sort of warm personality, and I think again, we talked, I think, on the previous episode with Causeway about how that was a film which could have gone down the easy route in terms of characterization, performance, and stuff like that. And what I found here, which I wasn't expecting, was there was a lot of lightness and unexpected humor, I think, in just that even though he is trapped within his body and the flat and stuff like that, and he's in a dark, desperate place, there is still light within him. There's a real sort of humor that he has, which sort of bounces off quite well with his sort of best friend played by Hong Chow, and then you sort of see the other side where he's sort of sparking off against Sadie Sink. So, I mean, what did you make of his performance? Do you think it merits the accolades which are currently being thrown his way?
That I do, yeah. I thought it was an excellent performance, and it's one of those ones. I think it almost goes back to kind of what you were saying at the beginning about the kind of the lack of marketing for this film. I mean, when you think about A24, like, marketing is something that probably is in a lot of people's top 3 list of kind of word association, and I think I remembered, I wish I was the one that came out with this great theory, but I was chatting to someone at London about it, and they were like, the reason that A24 doesn't release a trailer for this film is that as soon as it does, it's going to be memed, it's going to be gifted, it's this big fat guy, whereas they just keep it on that image, let the word of mouth going, it allows the film to breathe, so that when you maybe get that opening image of, Brendan Fraser's kind of character, you're able to go, oh wow, like, that looks really authentic, it looks real, it looks also quite disgusting, difficult to maybe sort of see. It attacks your prejudices and thoughts almost immediately, and then you sort of settle into the film after that, as opposed to you having that kind of conversation beforehand or seeing screenshots, etc. So I think it is really important for people that they see this film as much as possible, and I think A24's lack of marketing is marketing for this film in a really unique way, and that thought has stuck with me since. And I genuinely bought into his performance and so on, and while I think the script presents problems, that doesn't take away from Fraser's performance whatsoever, and you are watching that and rooting for him as an actor, but equally as a kind of character to find that happiness and redemption. And I really hope whatever happens next for Fraser is the best. I mean, obviously there's the frustration of Batgirl, but he's taken it very much in his stride, which has been good to see, and very positive. So I want nothing for the best from him, and I think he stands a very good chance of a nomination and a potential win. But it was an excellent performance. I just felt maybe some of the interactions, especially that with his daughter, were really hampered by a pretty poor script.
See, I think I totally take on board what you mean about the potential memification of the whale, because there's that whole sort of opening sort of segment where we first meet sort of Charlie, where someone's banging on his door, and then he's basically interrupted just after entertaining himself to a movie on a laptop, and there's that sort of awkward humor, but then you sort of see him go about his daily life. And if that had been, like you say, in the trailer or something, it would have been very easy to then take clips of that and then make memes and gifs and stuff like that, because it's all about context and stuff like that. I mean, the one I immediately go to is Marriage Story, that devastating argument between Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson's character, where wish every day I wake up and wish you were dead and stuff like that. But then it's been turned into one of those 4 sort of picture memes where Adam Driver is like, every day I wake up, and he's like hitting the wall and stuff, and then you insert your own sort of punchline and stuff like that. So yeah, there's potential that by seeing that sort of stuff out of context, it could potentially influence your opinions and stuff like that, and say, oh, it's the Fat Brendan Fraser movie and stuff. So yeah, it's keeping people's expectations and stuff at bay, going in, and you're just sort of leading with the positive reviews of his performance. And at the moment, I think out of the gate of Venice, he was talked about as, yeah, I mean, it makes the perfect story, this sort of comeback sort of thing. But it does seem at the moment that I guess we'll have to see once the film is out this weekend how things shift and the sort of general public sort of get to see it and stuff like that. But there does seem to be a shift back towards sort of Austin Butler for Elvis. So once again, we're going to sort of be in the situation where it's going to be, playing a dead real life person always seems to trump, a character of fiction when it comes to the Oscars. Even though Austin Butler's performance as Elvis is infinitely better than Rami Malek's Freddie Mercury in Bohemian Rhapsody. Why, this is a complete tangential point, why you would want to market your Whitney Houston biopic film with the lead tagline of "from the writer of Bohemian Rhapsody," I'm not entirely sure, but that's something by the by. So yeah, no, so I guess a lot of the conflict for this character comes from his interactions with 2 people in particular. A third person, his ex-wife Samantha Morton, who turns up for one scene, turning into a real sort of one scene wonder this year, particularly given that she does the same in She Said. But you've got 2 characters. You've got his best friend, played by Hong Chow, who is his former partner's sister, and then you've got his estranged teenage daughter, Sadie Sink. Now, you hinted there that you were not particularly fond of Sadie Sink, maybe potentially her performance, or maybe more how the character was written. But I think in my review, I said that she proves that she's the real deal and a bona fide superstar in the making. She lights up Charlie's murky apartment whenever she's on screen and leaves a void when she's not. She flicks effortlessly between sullen and hostile, directing a rage at her absent father. In other words, it is the perfect teenager performance. I thought she completely captured a sullen teenager, but perhaps you were not as enamored as I was.
And no, again, the problem is just that script. It's so, everything about it is so heavy-handed that it undermines a lot of things. I mean, it's
theatre, isn't it? You have to be.
yeah, but Brendan Fraser, like he rises above it. But like Sadie Sink, I'm sitting there watching this teenage girl, and I'm like, if we just take the A24 film canon, there have been so many great young teen performances, from Hereditary to 8th Grade and so much kind of more. And I was watching this and I was just like, she is that irritating young daughter that you see in Oscar bait movies. I was sitting there thinking, with her performance, I bet I would have loved it in the theater, seeing The Whale for the first time. But in a film, I was watching it going, oh dear. And I mean, there's a bit where just, it just wasn't very, very good, and it just undermined it. It was like, this character is an annoying teenage girl, and that happens all the time, with films, these annoying teenage boys, girls. But this was just like, this is just cliched nonsense, and just some of the arguments that they were having, it just was like, No, it made it very difficult for me to watch, where I was just becoming more frustrated with the script. I'm sure she's a great actress, and I'm sure she'll prove to do so, but she needs, I don't think it was this script that was the best showcase of her talents. You watch that and think she could be great, but ultimately she can't elevate that script beyond the cliche.
No, and I think what was interesting is that this obviously sort of dropped at Venice. This was sort of just a couple of weeks after the summer of Stranger Things season 4, where Sadie Sink was basically the standout star of that season, and she had the incredible Kate Bush running up the hill moment. So she was sort of riding that wave, and all the talk was about her going into Venice. But for me, I was actually potentially more impressed with Hong Chau's performance. I thought her character got a lot more sort of light and shade and stuff like that, and you could really sort of feel like the conflict of, she loves this guy, but he's essentially killing himself with his diet and stuff like that, and there's only so much she's reaching the end of her tether, and how long she's going to be willing to hang around and watch him sort of self-destruct and stuff like that. I mean, what did you make of her performance? Because she's also having a bit of a year at the moment as well, with lots of great supporting performances in this and the likes of The Menu as well.
Yeah, I thought she did much better. I think her role was a little less stereotyped in terms of kind of the roles. There was probably similar to kind of Frasier's kind of character, sort of with Charlie, where there is a trauma there is a really emotional heart there, and I bought into these years that they've been together, and what they've been through, and what she experienced with her brother. I thought it was, she's in it every so often, and she works really well off Frasier. I think that's the story that I find more interesting than sort of that father-daughter relationship, which I've seen done many times before, which means that the bar for something like that is incredibly high. And I thought this sort of relationship and the tragedy between the two that they share was genuinely quite touching and so on. And that's the story I find more interesting.
And did you recognize that the young man in it was the young kid from Iron Man 3? Because I did not realize that until about 2 or 3 days after I'd seen the film.
No, I didn't realize that. No, this is a revelation to me as well. So yeah.
I spent going, I think that boy, he looks familiar, but I just couldn't place him. And then I realized it was
that the guy from the opening of the Nice Guys. I always remember him from the first 2 seconds of that film.
Yeah. I grew up in Shane Black films and is now clearly an adult. It'll be like seeing Jacob Tremblay all grown up now, like in 5 years' time in a movie, going, oh, that was the kid from The Room, and that one incredible scene from Doctor Sleep. So, I mean, I think we've sort of hinted at it there, sort of the theatricality of a lot of the dialogue within the film, but also the way that it's shot and stuff like that. And you could not escape, for me, I think, probably one of my major issues with the film. I still gave it 5 stars because it moved me in such a way, but it was very clear that there was a sort of exit stage left problem, and that people would keep coming and going out of a door and stuff like they would on the stage and stuff like that, and it got a bit repetitive, and so we faded back and then someone else knock on the door, someone would come in and stuff like that. So, I mean, did you feel there were any moments where it maybe was able to escape its theatrical boundaries, or were you always sort of conscious that you were watching an adaptation of a play?
From minute one, it was so difficult to escape that, that stage left again, where you're like, yeah, I could imagine this being a really good play to watch, but you're watching that going, okay, I really like Darren Aronofsky. I mean, it can be up and down. I mean, I loved Mother, Requiem for a Dream, Wrestler, Pie, those films I particularly really resonated with. A little less so things like Noah, for example. The Fountain was stunning to look at, but just a film that I've never felt compelled to go back and watch, but I rewatch. But with this, I was like, yeah, this is like a play adaptation. Like, just the staging of it, everything about it was just like, it's difficult because he's it's one of those ones. He understood the assignment. He's done it really well. And, if you're wanting to just perhaps showcase an actor, this is probably a very good way to do it, in terms of obviously what they faced in terms of COVID, budget. I imagine a film like this is very risky proposition. It's got a former Hollywood star that can you really bank on someone like that? It's a film that potentially could be very divisive. It could be conversations surrounding that. So I appreciate things were on a budget and perhaps they've stuck very well to doing that. But it just was constantly like, this is a play, and just even the dialogue felt theatrical, the direction felt theatrical, just the entire structure of the film felt that way, and it never once elevated beyond it. And it probably helped that, probably didn't help that I watched it in a converted theatre venue for the film.
You didn't see it in the Royal Festival Hall, did you?
I did, yeah. Awful audio as well, which just added to the whole experience of thinking, oh, this just isn't the version I want to see. I want to see this in a theatre.
Because, actually I was just going to ask you about Rob Simonsen's score, particularly for the final scene, because we're going to talk about that in a second. But question for you, if you'd gone into the film and watched the film and not known who the director was in advance, if someone had said at the end of the film, this film was directed by Darren Aronofsky, would you have been able to tell by watching it?
No.
Yeah, no, I did feel that it was maybe a bit lacking in his sort of typical sort of visual flair. He's very sort of bold in sort of other films that he's done, in particular, The Incredible Black Swan. However, there is one moment which is very Darren Aronofsky, and that's at the end. So we'll talk about the end. Now, I know that we're releasing this on day one of the Whale's release in America. So if you have not yet watched The Whale, you can pause the podcast now and come back when you have. Everyone done that? Okay, cool. So we're going to get into the end and just a little bit of talk about literature and stuff like that. Now, the whale of the title of the film does not refer to Charlie himself. However, it refers to the eponymous white whale from Moby Dick, because Charlie is an English tutor, and at several points throughout the film, he makes reference to one particular book review that he's very fond of, and it's basically he's at the big start of the film, he's almost sort of having a sort of heart attack or something, and he's desperately scrambling around to read this or have it read to him one final time. And it turns out at the end that this particular book report was actually written by his daughter, and what she did not remember at the time until she sort of reads it for him at the end is that it was making, the book reminded her of her father. So there it all sort of comes full circle, and you get the reasoning behind it. But the film does, as I hinted at, a major Darren Aronofsky thing, which is his infamous fade to white endings. The ending which has been used at the end of The Wrestler, the end of Black Swan, and now the end of The Whale, where essentially a tortured character finally finds completion, finds peace, even potentially at the sacrifice of their own life. I was completely and utterly blown away by the ending. I think Rob Simonsen's score sort of swept me up in that moment. The performances of the two actors in the moment, it all sort of came together for me, and yeah, it worked for me. However, I know that there's probably two specific shots in that final moment where it might have lost people. Worked for me, but potentially I have a feeling from what you said earlier that it did not work for you. And was it the feet coming off the ground and then the beach afterwards?
That was pretty bad, but I think the moment that the film sort of fell apart for me was it's just before then he's having this argument with his daughter, and then he has this argument with the students on the other end of the thing, and he's just like, I don't care how you fucking write anything, just write something that's real. And I was just like, oh my god, that's so that's high school student level script writing there, of just like, just write something that's real. And I just was like, oh, okay, that's pretty awful, that bit. And then just that whole final few bits where I was just kind of like, I just sort of checked out the film really at that point, where it was just like, oh, this is where it's going. And I didn't like the bit with the beach and so on. And yeah, I liked that he was getting up and making those strides towards his daughter, essentially killing himself off, and seeing some of the absolute great.
We don't know for sure. He could have a slightly ambiguousness to the ending.
He's dead. He's definitely dead. I'm going with that one. There's no ambiguous. There's nothing about this film that's subtle. Garth Marenghi, that I know writers that use subtext and they're all cowards. That meme 100% applies.
This is an uncowardly writer here.
Yeah, exactly. This is just, theatre, you can kind of get away with it. With like a film, it's like, no, it just takes you out of it and so on. And like, this film is meant to be above things like that, that's what a lot of the conversations are surrounding and so on. But you never hear people talk about this film in terms of the where it's going to go at Oscar season. No one ever sort of goes, oh, this could really get like best adapted screenplay or anything like that. I mean, it'll get nominated, it will 100% get nominated. It shouldn't, but it will. But it's just, the script is so bad that it just undermines the whole thing. I mean, people will have issues with this film, maybe due to perceived fat phobia. I mean, that doesn't exist in this film at all. And
yeah, I think that is like one of those. I think people having opinions on the treatment of fat people within this film are the same people who probably said that Trainspotting glamorizes heroin without actually having seen the film. I think people are obviously worried about how fat people are going to be portrayed in the film, but I think it actually deals with it quite sensitively. But that's just my opinion. Other people, some people will not like the film, but I think it is much more sensitive in its portrayal than some people may be worried about.
Yeah, and I mean, the best part of the film is the bit where there's no dialogue. And when I think back, and it's the bit where like he goes on this binge eating sort of suicide attempt, almost, of like, I'm just going to eat all these things and the pizza. And I mean, just this greed and gluttony is so uncomfortable and repulsive to watch. But it's like, this is brilliant. This is good cinema. This is a fantastic performance. That was so
Brendan Fraser
gripping
in a
to
600-pound fat suit eating Twinkies is Lee's idea of cinema.
And it really was, because I was like, this is just really powerful stuff. This was real uncomfortable. It's pretty telling that the best part of the film for me, if I had to pick a scene, was that, when there's no dialogue, being written.
Well, there you go. So I think you sort of mentioned it there. I mean, obviously, Brendan Fraser is 100% lock in for a Best Actor nomination. Whether or not he will win on the night, I think, will greatly depend on how people. Elvis was kind of written off early in the year, but does seem to be gaining traction. Whereas this one, yeah, like you say, there hasn't been much talk about the film other than Brendan Fraser's performance. I think it may sneak in like in the top 10, maybe like spots 8, 9 or 10 for Best Picture. But yeah, I just don't know if obviously it probably Best Hair and Makeup Oscar and stuff like that. But yeah, in terms of like the other ones which you need to sort of potentially get in, I don't think we'll see director. I don't think we'll see like editing and stuff like that. So I think for this one, it does feel like it's going to be Brendan Fraser or bust.
Yeah, I think so as well, and I'm very curious to see the reactions over the weekend as this film drops and so on. That it's going to be one of these films that goes out of the bubble of people that go to film festivals, critic circles. Like, what what are the general public going to think of this film? Like, I don't really know, to be honest.
Well, I guess we'll find out in a few days when we see all the reaction from American audiences. But a glimmer of hope for Brendan Fraser fans and Batgirl fans in particular. Apparently, now that some department heads have moved around at DC, I believe the directors of Batgirl were in discussions with James Gunn, so maybe there is a glimmer of hope, and that, you know, it might not be dead and buried. They might be waiting, and if Brendan Fraser does indeed win Best Actor, we might get to see Batgirl. Who knows? It might not have been completely written off yet. So fingers crossed. That's why we want to see Brendan Fraser win Best Actor, not because, you know, it's a better performance or a worse performance than Austin Butler's, but essentially if he wins, we might be able to see Glasgow's Gotham on the big screen. So there we go. We'll be back at some point to review, I believe, Eternal Daughter will be the next one. I will have to rent it from iTunes, yes.
16th of December, it's available for rental. So, yeah, we could be back in maybe a few weeks.
We'll have to see. Depends how flush I'm feeling, I guess, and how much I'm willing to spend on it.
I'm going to be confident it's going to be a cheap one. My logic behind it, it's currently $15 to buy, so it's going to be.
Good. Yeah, then it'll be rentable in a couple of weeks. So yeah, maybe like a $9.99 or a $6.
I think it's going to be cheaper than that. I'm going to say $6.99. I think it's going to be the Marcel the Shell rental price. So
if we drop a new episode of Eternal Daughter in a couple of weeks' time, you'll know that it went on at $6.99, and I decided that I could cope with that. But what we have is, would you like a final breaking piece of A24 news?
Shoot.
Sundance are in the midst of announcing their 2023 lineup, and there will be 2 A24 films premiering at Sundance next year, and they're All Dirt Road's Taste of Salt, directed by Raven Jackson, and You Hurt My Feelings, directed by Nicole Holofernes. So, we'll have 2 more A24 films to look forward to next year. We'll
finally be able to talk about that terrible Jesse Eisenberg film we both watched at Sundance last year.
Yeah, we watched it last year, and it finally got a release date over a year afterwards. So,
can you believe that's getting a cinema release?
I mean, I guess I can, but I mean, I think that it getting a release a year after Sundance sort of speaks volumes in itself. But I think when you have stars like Jesse Eisenberg and Oscar winner Julianne Moore, then yeah, it will get a small theatrical window. But if you heard our sort of teaser about that earlier this year, maybe prioritize some other films before you see that one. Unless you're like us and you have to watch every single A24 film, and then crack on and let us know what you think in the comments. But yeah, hopefully we'll be back in a couple of weeks with the Eternal Daughter. But until then, potentially if we don't see you or hear you before then, have a great Christmas and a great New Year. We'll see you soon on the A24 Project.